Hello, Erik. Welcome to the Transformational Learning Summit.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. This is actually the first time we've met, but you are somebody that I've been inspired by for a while, just seeing the trajectory of your work and what you've created with the 29K and with the IDGs that have emerged out of that process. And also just what I imagine the personal journey must have been behind all of that. So I'm looking forward to exploring some of that with you today. And I think I'd like to start just asking you, um, what does transformation mean to you?
Oh wow. I mean, there's the research science answer to that with all the theories of adult development theory and the subject object process and stuff like that. But um, that's not what it means to me. I mean, that's the concept of it, right? What does it mean to me? I mean, there's something about it's definitely a process of moving into not knowing because I don't know what I'm transforming into. If it's about me,
Mm,
like how am I transforming? Um, so it's somehow moving into a space where I may be a little bit more connected to myself, others, and the planet or the soil. Uh, and it's usually something I have words for after the fact. But in it, I call it pain, suffering, and
oh
maybe
boy.
reflection. And then
Mm,
there's like the beautiful story like of selling transformation and like yeah, it's this transformative process and blah blah blah. I mean that sounds great, but the actuality of transformation, from my experience, is one of screaming and fighting of like I don't want to do this and this is painful, this is scary, and maybe also trusting and just going with it and letting go. But it's really moving into something that I don't know since I'm not there yet, obviously.
mm. Do you think it always has to be that way? That pain and suffering part. There is something about transformation, about what you said, the not knowing, and that not knowing can be a source of deep anxiety. Maybe just in that process, there's that that's the pain. But do you think it always has to be that way?
No, and I do think that's the kind of letting go part and like dancing with it,
Mm,
but accepting that that's part of the process. I think enables the dance. We're saying like this is a dance with tricky steps.
mm,
Uh, and I may stumble and fall. Like the terrain is not fully known. Like maybe it's not this polished glass dance floor, and I'll do my little mamba on it. But it's rather a dance where I don't really know all the parts. Um, I don't understand the music fully. I haven't danced here before. I don't know my partner.
mm,
And maybe I'm Bambi on ice. But still dancing, right? Still enjoying it.
mm,
And maybe with the right type of support, maybe it's about moving from it being a dance of anxiety to a dance of adventure, right?
mm. There was a word you used, I think, in your opening response to me, which was concept of it, the transformation as a concept versus the direct experience. And I think this is really an interesting territory because you have these like the Bob Keegan levels of development and all these great conceptual frameworks and in some ways the IDGs of course as well, like a
Mm.
really great conceptual framework. And then there's the reality of something that really has to be lived, that you can't just open a book and read and be like, oh, I get it. um, and for me that's really a big part of this of of being an agent, a vehicle for this kind of work in the world. And I wonder how has that been for you as far as um, the work of cultivating transformation in the world in one way or another. And I'm not even sure if that's the word that you use. This is a word that I'm kind of putting into the spaces. So with the work of say 29K and oh, what led to it, was transformation a word that was part of that approach?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the context from which we built 29K and later the IDGs is the Oak Island Foundation, and that was very much the exploration of how inner growth or inner transformation, inner
Mm,
development can lead to societal change and how those are interlinked. So it's like, I mean, broadening the concept of self, both in space and time. So you start seeing that you're kind of tending to or mending the disconnections between self, others, and the planet. Um, so the language was definitely there. And I mean, academically, what I studied and kind of what I also was moved a lot by from the research is from neuroscience is very much that we have this. I mean, we're so entrenched in language that we don't even know that we have it. We think the world is actually symbols and signposts and language, but it really isn't. It's just the lens through which we see the world that creates also what we think is possible, who we are. And the consequence of that is that it really controls our behavior. With technology, that means a lot because we're now shaping our future and the planet from that language. So, so I think for me, there's always been this distinction between the stories that we tell around, especially really important things like transformation and growth, transformational learning, and then the actuality of it, or like how does that look in the room? How am I really showing up? And it's so interesting because when we started, um, I mean, I was always like, language is great. It's such a powerful tool, but let's not confuse it. Let's not confuse the storyteller with the lived experience of life.
mm,
And the lived experience is the sensory experience right now. And after this conversation, we'll only have a faint memory of it. It will never be as rich as it is right now. And that small slither of a memory is kind of what we can keep from any experience we have. And it's also the same machinery that we use to think about the future. So let's not confuse the storyteller with the lived experience. And for me, I was always so focused on um, the lived experience in the room, which also leads to an emphasis of the physical experience of transformation. Like, how does that look in the actual room? And doing that, a couple of things became very clear. One was the emotionality and the aliveness in the room. It was less when I was being the great, guru in the room, the teacher, like teaching people there, having the leadership courses with high executives or youth or uh, average Joe. Like it was less when they were getting all the cool concepts and all the cool stories and all the theories about system 1 and 2 and all of these developmental and psychological frames. And there was a lot more aliveness in the break, like when they were just talking to each other
mm,
and hanging out and connecting, or when we're actually doing in-depth work in small groups, like they're really connecting to each other's lived experience and sharing their stories. So I was always honoring that as and seeing that and also looking into the research of why that is, that is actually kind of where the magic really happens. Uh, so it's so weird to then initiate a digital platform that is quite far disconnected from the physical experience and the kind of powerful dynamics and almost sacred dynamics that can happen in that physical realm. So I was really coming into to scaling transformation and enabling that from the complete opposite end. Like the last thing I wanted to do was be more on my screen or
mm,
uh, other people to be more on their screens. But it did. I think that it also brought some value of like really being skeptical to it, uh, and then like being the anti-app guy to actually be initiating a nonprofit around an app, delivering deep experiences, but then really having to make very clear distinctions and think really deeply into kind of what really makes us come alive. When do we really feel connection? And what are just the stories around it? Like there's such a difference there. What we think is transformation, what we think we want, what we want to go to, what courses we want to be part of, or the stories we want to leave a course from is not the same thing as what really moved us, and what really changed us. So that's been a real tricky journey. Also horrifically difficult and painful because like you think that it's a cool thing to have philanthropists join forces with you and say, like, here's millions of dollars. Let's use them to change as many lives as possible in a transformative way so that they in turn can change and create positive change in their environments. Until you actually have the opportunity, because the weight of that was for me at least, was really, really heavy, knowing that all these funds, all this energy could go into something that was concrete, that, you know, could really save lives. But now we're doing this. So how do we really do that well? And just kind of trying to be creative, do first principle thinking under the weight of that was by far the most difficult thing I've ever done.
Mm. How did you, so there's two questions that are emerging for me here. One is, how did you manage that internal process? And the second is, how did you approach the R&D? How did you, you know, like go from this concept of an app for transformation to actually um, crystallizing something specific to, like, maybe what you suggested, first principle thinking? I'm curious, like, what that actually looked like in practice.
Yeah. Mm, I mean, I think like my process of it was, I mean, it was one of holding my breath, to be honest. Of like, I have no clue what we're doing. I'm quite certain I'm not the right person for the job. Like, but then and trying to find, I mean, that was actually that was the process wasn't that I was initiating this. I was one of the three founders, and then we looked for an external CEO. Uh, and eventually, like after not finding one for months, my two co-founders turned to me and they said, Eric, we honestly think that you've been the best candidate for the job since day one. We want you to take it. Um, and I think being open with that helps a lot, of saying like, I'm not going to even pretend that I have the answers as like the old paradigm CEO with the answers and the plan and the top down, let's do this. But rather say, uh, this is an open field and this has not been done before, because there's like two levels of innovation. One is the organization of being nonprofit, open source, co-created platform, the Creative Commons licensing the content. We have no external equity, like, so the donations are just clean donations. You never get anything back. And then there's the actual platform solution that hadn't been built. So we were like, should we do VR? Should we do biometrics? How do you scale this? What are the kind of trend lines? What do we think? Where will we be in 5 years? And that was really difficult. It's like, what is a, because it wasn't either what I saw early on was a lot of individuals working with us. They fell into a solution for a problem, and then let's build a platform from that. But it doesn't really work, because if you customize a lot of the content and the actual format of the platform for a solution, or a specific target group's need, it doesn't scale. So you have to really understand like what is common along a large set of different, and we chose to go an evidence-based approach. So across a large set of different intervention programs, what is the common denominator that makes them efficient, like that really make them work over time? And digging into that was really tricky to kind of try to distill like what do the professors of the world agree on is components that are first principle that are like prerequisites for an intervention program to actually drive transformational change, which is not the same thing as what is selling out there. What do people buy? What do they want? What do they recommend? What has the 10 out of 10 star recommendation? It's not the same thing. Like we were like, if we can go, if we know that if we can go really deep transformationally, like talk about stuff that really moves people in a deeper way, that's the proof of concept. So that was kind of the bar that we set. Talk about shame, inadequacy, fear. Like so we said like the first program was self-compassion, Christine
Mm.
Neff's research on it. And we went with like, so I looked through all the intervention programs. It has really big effect sizes, like a larger effect sizes than most programs out there. ACT, CBT, stuff like that. It's really powerful, but it's also because it's so heavy and people don't want to work on it. I mean, the first time I
Mm.
heard about self-compassion, I was like, yeah, great, super interesting, probably not for me. And that was my subconscious, my kind of limbic system saying, there's too much here.
Mm.
There's too much emotionality here. Uh, and I was afraid. But I didn't surface it as I was afraid. I surfaced it as this is not interesting for me.
Mm.
And then actually going into those interventions and actually doing them, it was like, wow, the reason why I didn't want to go into this was because that's exactly what I needed, but I didn't want to face it, as most of these things are. So there's like and it also plays into the market dynamics is like what is most transformational is probably not what you're looking for. It's
Mm.
probably the things that you discarded or brushed off or said that that's not interesting for me because I'm going in this direction and I actually know what is most transformational for me, which is such a rational, weird way of thinking about oneself because that's not at all how the brain works or how we works. But it's a cool story, thinking that you're in control. Um, so what we found was at least is you need a couple of components. One is evidence-based tools, of course, that have shown to be efficient. I mean, that's a easy way for us to say work on things that have been proven to work for a large set of people across time and culture. And then secondly is like it's not about the story. It's not about the cognitive rational thinker understanding the concept of X, self-compassion in this case. It's not that I read the book. Like reading the book does not help. Most self-help books have no effect on transformation or stress levels or whatever. They don't work. A few do, but most don't. So it's not about understanding. It's about really doing. It's about getting embodied into this. So that was like the second component is like you need to really practice it over time. So evidence-based tools practiced over time. And then looking into why does therapy really work? Like why do transformational processes work? And there we found something that I kind of intuited and it was that it's actually not the therapy form that's the thing that has like a 25%, 20% effect on the total effect. The thing that is like roughly 55 to 60% of all the effects of therapy is how is this relationship trusting and safe for me?
Mm.
So it's like if I mean back in the day, like Paleolithic area, we didn't have therapists. We just had people around the campfire, right? And we were processing and sense making around the campfire. And if that was a safe tribe and an environment for you where I actually could feel seen and heard, that's therapy. I mean, that's us collectively making sense of the chaos around us and figuring out what to do. So it's kind of built in to being just human. So digging into that was like, what are the principles around that connection? Like what really makes that magic really happen? And how can that scale? Because if it can't scale, if you have to be a trained therapist, like this is going to be a super expensive way to change 5 million people's lives. Because that's what we were aiming for is like deep transformational growth for 5 million people as a start. And what we found was so three components for the platform, at least just to cover those, is like evidence-based tools practiced over time, and then a safe and trusting relationship, like human connection.
Mm.
The human connection has this uh, other unique aspect to it. And that's that it's not only an intervention in itself, it's not only a catalyst for transformation, but it's also what makes you retain through the process. So it
Mm.
actually builds retention over time. And this is super interesting. So this is also like I think the main finding, if like anybody listening to this conversation is building these types of processes, it's like it's not about the content. It's not even about the need. It's not about the need. It's not why they came. They came like you need a bright, shiny neon sign, like come here, buy
Mm.
this, get this, blah, blah, blah. Tell the story to the storyteller. But that's not what's going to keep them in practice.
Mm.
It's that they fall in love with other people and they
Mm.
realize that I'm not alone and that there's hope. Like I can get out of this and I'm not alone in it. Because what happens? So how do you do that? How do you facilitate that? Well, what we found was quite simple principles. We looked into, I mean, all like different forms of facilitating and especially scaling the transformational experiences. And I mean, one of them that I think deserves a lot more credibility than it gets, at least in Scandinavia, is the AA movement or
Mm.
NA movement or
Mm.
NAA movement, like all the versions of it.
Yeah, it's super
Both in
powerful.
or yeah, super, and then they're designed so well. Like I'm always like I'm in awe of the people who design that.
Mm.
On an organizational level, it's like nobody can ever represent this organization. There is no central coordinating
Mm.
part of this organization. It is a fully distributed network. I mean, that's pioneering stuff. You know, well, I don't know how many decades ago that was that they designed that, but it's probably like 50, 60 years ago, right? So just the principles of how they designed the organization was beautifully well, because if you're going to build transformational spaces and you are not worthy of trust, you shouldn't be doing it. Like if
Mm.
you have an incentive to sell them the next course after this, that's like having the shop and the yoga shala or the temple and the store in the same place. And there's a
Mm.
reason why you never had that historically. You never had the temple and the yoga shala mixed in with why you actually or where you buy stuff. Like you don't sell
Mm.
t-shirts in the yoga shala, right? There's a reason for that. And it's because of this incentive. When you're very vulnerable inside the temple, you don't want to uh, be moved in any direction that isn't for your own growth. So what we saw was building the scaffolding around the organization is central, and then the experience of building these transformational these moments basically is like if you're going to scale this, what we found was it's enough to say everything that's said here is confidential. I mean, that goes kind of without saying. But so one principle is confidentiality. A second one is don't interrupt. Like it's so simple because a lot of the transformation comes from me actually putting words on this messy internal experience and just making sense of that, and then actually noticing what I said. Said, did I just say that?
Mm.
I mean, I know that I had that experience myself, like in a transformational process. Maybe I was like 19. And I was like, so if I use this tool on a client, what happens if they break? And I was like, did I just say that? Is that my perspective on how people can develop? And if you talk about certain things, or if you move them, they can actually break. And I realized, like, wow, that's from my childhood. That was about me. That
Mm.
was not about them. And just hearing myself say that is this sense-making process that can be quite transformational. So not interrupting is one component. A second one, which is connected to that, is don't give advice. Like they are not a problem for you to solve, and they are not a simple story. Like if you think you have an answer for them, it's most likely wrong, because they're not the simple thing that you can just add to and like say this thing and everything will solve. That's more my wanting to be the hero than actually listening to the context of what is needed right now. So no interrupting, confidentiality, of course, and then and no problem solving. And just that is like it's more or less enough for real profound moments to take place. And it's almost like you build this little mini temple or shala of, and it can be done online. And then this is the thing that kind of blew me away. It's like this was pre-pandemic, and nobody was open to having deep video conversations. Nobody thought that was possible. And I was like, that's so interesting because when I'm on the phone, I know that I have had deep
Mm,
conversations on the phone, but I don't think I can do it through video. It's because we're using it as a tool professionally more than anything else, right? Um, and we did this with these principles. So it's a self-facilitated group. So we also killed the hero completely. Like no guru, no person to project onto. Is like we are the ones creating this space through these simple principles. We read the content out, we do the work together. And I'm really leveraging kind of the learning that I had at the Oak Island of like seeing that that's when the magic happens. It's not when they're listening to the guru. That's more of a problem than it is a catalyst for transformation. And it has a lot more to do with the ego of the person on the stage than it has to do with the transformation of the recipients. Um, I'm uncertain that listening to gurus is really as transformational as people think it is.
mm,
Doing work together and relating to themselves, to others, to the world, and really doing the work in the moment. There's a lot much more to that, and it's a much more neurologically embodied process. So you get access to a lot more than just the stories of like, oh,
mm,
I'm listening to Ram Dass or Anna Watts or whoever. I mean, that's great stuff. I do that a lot, but it's not as deep as the other part. So we just created the space where they could self-facilitate the tools, share their stories. And what happened was, uh, again and again and again, you saw that they just fell in love with each other. And they're
mm,
like, yeah, we're done with this course. And we talked about shame. We work through shame with like Gestalt chairs in the room, and like they're doing it in front of their phones, and they're crying, and they're like, I've never said this to anybody. And we had people, saying like the way that this has enabled me to learn how to converse with others has changed how I have conversations with my best friend
mm,
and with my mom. Because they just stopped interrupting. They started listening for real, started showing up. Um, so it was really, it was like we kind of found something there on a first principle level that has nothing to do with 29K. It has a lot to do with what it means to be human.
mm,
uh, and kind of found that like this campfire has been missing for a
mm,
lot of us. And the closest resemblance to it is therapy. But therapy is usually like the therapist is listening and they don't share about how their life is going and how messed up they are, like what is the human condition. But in this setting, like you are sharing with me and I'm sharing with you. And then that means that I can have this aspect that's the researchers called common humanity. Whereas like I realize that we're all kind of messed up. We're kind of trying to get by, longing for the same things. And it really creates this commonality of the inner world, that we're kind of longing for and that we're kind of missing, I think, especially in the modern world where everybody's a brand and you want to show whatever like
mm,
achievements you have. We're really starving each other of the kind of connection that we're also longing for, I think.
mm. I love this theme of, or at least this is something I often meet and question this territory of therapy versus humanity. Oh, this is the work for a therapist, and there's a part of me that's always like, well, maybe if more people had the capacity to really be with each other, we wouldn't need so many therapists. And so there's this almost like it's like I feel, this is my personal philosophy, that we have a responsibility as human beings to hold space for each other, to hold space for the pain of another person without trying to fix it or trying to diminish it or push it away or, saying, oh, it's going to be okay or something like that, to really be with it. And that's uncomfortable territory. Um, and that's, then that becomes something that like, oh, maybe you should see a therapist or something like that. And that's not to diminish at all the value and the necessity of therapy in the world, but it does feel to me that that many of the world's problems might be addressed if if the some core functions that you might get in therapy are um, something that we really acknowledge as what we might offer to each other. And part of it is also maybe the like the commercialization of the world. I remember when I read Sacred Economics. Did you ever read that book by Charles Eisenstein?
No, but I know of Charles,
Okay, yeah.
of his work, but I haven't read the book.
So he talks about how, like, because we need to increase GDP, we need to find more and more things to sell. And so things that we traditionally offer, like, hey, I'll walk your dog for you, or, like I'll watch your kids, or like I'll just listen to you. They become, ways of
Yeah.
making money. So anyway, I mean, I think about this a lot because in my world of supporting group experiences, every once in a while, someone will be like, well, wait a second, you're bringing these like really deep relational things into an experience. Isn't that more like the domain of therapy? Or shouldn't you be more professionally certified to do this? I'm like, I don't know. Do I need a professional certification to be with the pain of another person? And so I think that's a rich territory.
No, I fully agree. I mean, I mean, I've been working with researchers and scientists for 10, 15 years. And there's like there's the technicality of it. There's the technical
Mm,
knowledge that you would want them to have to recognize psychological illnesses and patterns of thought or dissociation, stuff like that. That is like, boom, I can pinpoint something here, I can find it, and we can actually
mm,
prescribe a specific set of interventions or a specific set of medicines that will specifically, and they're tailored to help you with that. And that really works. Like
mm,
we there, I mean, there's been these massive uh, innovations along those lines, but that's almost none of the preventative work, and it's not most of therapy. Most of the value that comes from preventative work and most therapy is this common humanity, being seen, being heard, hearing myself, understanding that I'm not broken, that I can make sense of my own world. And I have a lot of, you know, intuitive wisdom within me if I can just self reflect on what is my next step. Like people are quite good at that. And maybe they can grab the tail off of some really destructive ideas like individualism or that value is the same thing as money. I mean, you can do that through process of just reflecting. And that is something we I would say that we have a moral obligation towards each other to enable that, and that we've been starved for it. And it can't be substituted by economic transactions. Or it could, but only for the people who are quite wealthy. It doesn't
mm,
really.
mm. There was something else you touched on earlier that also resonated with me, which is um, I call it sell people what they want, give them what they need, in
Yeah,
the sense of the wrapping, because people rarely, maybe recognize or value the things that they really need, like really
yeah,
feeling heard. I'm not going to pay for, unless I'm hiring a therapist, I'm not paying for an experience where I can really feel heard and seen.
yeah,
But that experience of feeling heard and seen in the context of whatever shiny content might be there that brought you into that experience is really, like you said, is what retains you, is what keeps you there, is what actually makes that experience uh, transformational, deeply meaningful in some way.
exactly. And I mean, if you just make the distinction that like you have a thinker that has language, and then you have a doer that has emotion
Mm,
in your brain, basically. The thinker does not know, does not understand, does not fully have a story for the doing living self. We talk about the rider and the elephant. The elephant doing most of the work and most of the behavior, most of the decisions. And as soon as you just accept that premise that that's what neuroscience is showing us,
mm,
then of course there's going to be a difference between what I want and what I need. And if you can see that, if you have the knowledge of actually making the distinction for somebody else, it's like, yeah, I hear what you want, and I'm going to incorporate, in giving you what you want, I'm going to also incorporate what you need.
mm,
That also puts you in a position of power, honestly, because you have that competence to make sense of something that they really can't see. You're seeing their blind side, right? So it also enables this call for responsibility, to make sure that you are aligning the incentives for their best and not for your best.
Mm.
And that's where both the process of this, of building the settings for this type of growth to happen, has to be aligned with the structure of it. Because otherwise you're asking for trust, but you're not thinking about trustworthiness, which is what you should be asking, what you should be obsessing about rather than asking for trust.
Mm.
So I think that these need to be coupled really, and it's a tricky thing to do in a market economy. But at least we should have language that really makes all forums regarding transformational growth and deep growth accountable for this type of transparency, stuff like that. Because it does work. I mean, it's powerful, but it can also be misused in the same way.
Mm. And it's tricky because the nature of transformation is it involves vulnerability. It involves a willingness um, to work with something that is very deep inside you, to open
Yeah,
that territory up. And in that moment of opening, um, you kind of have to let your guard down. And
exactly.
so there's a I think this is a really interesting territory, honestly, between offering this work and selling this work, because inevitably, many people, amazing people, many of the people in our community, heart-centered creators, they're in a position where their livelihood depends on
Yeah,
being able to sell this work. Um, and so it's a tricky territory to sell it in the right way, to not take it. I think most people I encounter in this territory are more on the side of struggling to articulate the value of what they offer. But then you see some really successful people that maybe are on the other side of, it's a little bit kind of manipulative and a different kind of like reptilian approach to
yeah,
selling. And yeah, I
yeah.
wonder if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, yeah, many, many, many. I mean, I mean, I would never have started 29K, or I would have just I would have closed it down if we made it into a for-profit company.
Why is that?
Uh, because of misalignment. Like you can never fully um, make sure that if you have, especially if you have external ownership, like the reason why you have, if you want to sell your shares, if you're selling your shares, like we have to be honest that like what you're selling is not your shares. What you're selling is your autonomy. You're selling your autonomy so that you promise that you will maximize for profit. That's what you're getting paid. That's why you get paid quite well for it, is because you're selling your values, you're selling your purpose. And it's only in the rare cases that that is fully aligned with the new owners that you won't have a conflict in value or direction. But then there's still this kind of uh, there is, I mean, even when, not only when you're selling your product or services, but also when you do it by donations, you have to have money, right? I mean, just to pay the salaries. And it it really pushes you to make different choices than you would if you only were doing it for the good of the people. And the delta, the people are paying for.
Mm.
They will always be paying for it. And maybe it's not something that, it won't show up. Maybe you can like uh, get away with some of it, but somebody's always paying. And I mean, it is tricky. I think it's also reality. Like we have to pay our bills, right? And we have to make ends meet. And we're creating this huge value for people. I think one thing, because we're all in the market, like we can't really move outside of it. We don't have a good alternative for it yet. But I think being cognizant of it, having putting language on this conflict is really important, because it means that we can speak about it, we can explore it, we can feel into it and feel kind of when it's gone too far. Yeah.
And sometimes just being transparent about it, I feel, can be powerful to, I mean, even I think selling in itself is a transformational process. You know, the ability to articulate something with integrity in a way that communicates clearly to another person and opens up options for them without coercion.
Yeah.
Really finding that, to find your complete authenticity and like a sense of just feeling complete with what you're sharing, you know, without this awkwardness
Yeah.
you know, like, this is what I'm offering to the world, and being able to communicate about that that resonates with a person without trying to somehow persuade them or psychologically
No.
manipulate them. Like, just being able to do that. I mean, I just for myself as a lifelong entrepreneur, I feel like that's been and continues to be a great source of transformation and inquiry.
No, it is. I mean, I remember, yeah, like the first years of entrepreneurship, I was, giving away everything, because I was like, no, I'm not in this for money. Like, I really want to see the change. So it's like, I'm not going to charge you. I'm giving away the money that I earn. That's actually
Mm,
what I did. But eventually, kind of owning it, that like what I'm doing is a huge service and it's worth a lot. Like, so there is transformation in that. And growing into that, I think, is a process that anybody within the space kind of needs to do. But then zooming out and saying, like, okay, if I know that transformational processes, that there's this delta between what people need and what they want, um, either I'm selling them the symptoms and making them a recurring customer. Um, and I'm like, there's always this next step. Or am I actually really trying to serve them so that they won't come back? And I mean,
mm.
that's the difference between a really good tutor or teacher or therapist and
Mm.
somebody who's really misaligned. Um, and I mean, this plays into any alignment issue, like the AI alignment issues, like the AI, AI tutor, AI therapist. Of course, the goal should be that they are not needed anymore. But that's not what we're building right now. They're building
Mm.
subscriptions models, because if you can like keep you on this transformational process, there's always this next thing to do. That's the way to make good money. And that's the misalignment in action. And then you have the complete opposite. I saw some guy in San Francisco who I thought he used this beautifully. He built this process that was deeply transformational for men, and the way he sold it, the neon sign was, "This is a course to get laid." Uh,
It
I thought
always works.
it was so good. It was like there's so much wisdom in that, because one, he was like, I'm fine with other people seeing me as the get laid guy. Like,
Mm.
I'm not into being the guru, so I can really like pull my brand in the dirt,
Mm.
because I know that by doing this, I will attract men who think that women are things that, they can just use and get laid,
Mm.
right? And that's the exact right customer. That's the exact right person who needs this deeply transformational process. At
Mm.
the end of that, they will never look at the woman wanting to get laid. At the end of that, they may have intercourse, but it's with respect, and they do that because they're finding the women, and they're becoming the men that deserve deep relationships with women. So it's like the entire
Mm.
like egolessness, but also willing to be a little bit kind of dirty in the selling
Mhm,
process, but
mhm,
doing
mhm.
that with intention. Like, I thought it was such a beautiful, like, wise way of aligning the kind of misalignment of the human condition, and really trying to serve.
Mm. Mm. I love that. So I'd love to hear like a little more about just your journey with maybe with this. I want to use this word, the selling broadly, but your journey with, I feel like as an entrepreneur, you are kind of, you're always enrolling people into a vision, into
Yeah.
something, and you're finding the resources to to support that vision, and you're finding the people, and then you're finding a way to get that into the market and communicate about what you're doing in a way, whether or not, I mean, if we use this word selling broadly, it doesn't even always have to be with financial transaction. You know, even if you're getting people to use your free app, you're selling them the app, and you're getting donors to contribute money to your platform. So you're continually enrolling people into a vision, into an idea, into a possibility. And for me, that's been a journey of that's really where that's where shit gets real.
Yeah.
Finding myself in that territory, and I wonder, I could read something you wrote on your LinkedIn post, I think just a few days ago, in reference to the 29K app in the Google Play Store. But you wrote, through the years, the amount of love, pain, and passion gone into this gift to humanity from everyone involved has been mind-blowing to see. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your love, pain, and passion in the process.
So like my love, pain, and passion in regards to the 29K journey, or
I guess
that...
it doesn't have to be in 29K, but maybe just, I'm gonna broadly offer you the territory of your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. It's so funny because I've never seen myself as an entrepreneur.
No, I mean, see, again,
No, no,
you have to be careful
I
with these
mean,
words, but to
yeah, no,
me,
no,
and I think to many,
but I have. I mean, no, I hear
what's
you.
the
I mean,
word? What's the word that you would
no,
maybe?
no, I
Is
think
there a word?
it's correct. No, it is
Yeah.
correct. It's just that I don't have that. I mean,
I honestly, I prefer the word creator. That's, for me, I resonate more with that as a term than entrepreneur,
yeah,
but
yeah, maybe. I mean, exactly, because entrepreneur is very captured by the market dynamic of like, because you like all the initiatives that I've started have been nonprofits, except like Keynote, like my own company. Um, but it is an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, that's what we've been doing. I think, like, honestly, it's like I have this kind of through line that's been with me forever, and I feel that it kind of almost everything I've ever done stems from that space, uh, and it's kind of it's really why I do what I do. Uh, so my father was an Olympian. He was a discus thrower, and he met my mom. He was Swedish, atheist. He met my mom in Provo in Utah. She
she was
was Mormon.
Mormon.
She was
Mm.
Mormon, yeah. Big family, like 7 or 6 siblings. Father in like the CIA, military, and it was really like having those different worldviews. Like my father wanting to become the best in the world because he thought that like if I am the best in the world, something magical will happen. And that magical thing that I think will happen is that I'll be loved. Like I'll be enough. If I'm just the best, then I'll be enough. The pyramid, progress narrative, whatever, like call it whatever story we want. But if I have more power, more money, if I'm more well known, I will be happy. I'll be accepted. Something magical will happen. And that's like really pulling him. I mean, he decided when he was 12 that he wanted to be the best discus thrower in the world. But he was completely miserable. Like he died when I was 12. He was 37. I'm 37
Oh,
now.
that's
Yeah.
young.
Yeah, yeah. And due to pill overdose, because he was like completely, I mean, just like, I mean, he was in rehab. Like there was a lot of pain and suffering in that, because he was sacrificing everything that he could to reach that goal. And that's the best way to like run up a pyramid. Like if you want to excel through any of those types of games, is like make sure that you're sacrificing more than the person next to you, and that will most likely lead to progress. So externalize, right? Uh, so seeing that was one reality, and then seeing my mother and that side of the family have their faith and the Mormon like kind of religion that also supported the family because we were quite poor, especially when we then moved back to Sweden. Um, but it was also clear that like even though I saw that there was a lot of support coming from religion, I also saw that like both of my parents, they believe in two very different stories, and both can't be true.
Mhm.
So it meant that I could put them as an object, and I could be like, okay, so my mom believes in Mormonism. My dad is atheist, but believes in some type of heaven that will appear if he's on the top of the pedestal. And I'm like, you guys are crazy. I like this can't none of these can be true. And that made me question like all of the fairy tales that grown-ups tell themselves and think about like if that's not real or if those both can't be real at the same time, what is? What really means something to us and how our inner worlds, our inner belief systems, whatever, um, are kind of subject to be both hijacked, but also to develop, to change. So kind of trying to understand what makes life worth living and how can we make any progress in that direction before we end up where my father ended up, which is the kind of unsustainability narrative. So for me, it's like having that childhood and then, you know, seeing that the world is becoming more and more unsustainable, but we're like GDP heroinists. Like we have to have more, more, more. I'm like, you guys can't see this is like we're creating the problem that we're trying to solve. Like the way that we are solving problems is the problem. So we need transformational growth. We don't need technical growth. We don't need to become technically more powerful or to have better tools. We need to change how we are relating to ourselves, each other, and the planet. I mean, that's for me was like blatantly obvious. Um, so then I kind of delved into like the research on these topics after years of just self-help movement consumption of all the stuff I could ever find around this topic, but always feeling that most of it was kind of manipulative. Like it was like, this is how you become more successful. This is how people will like you more. This is how you use
Mm.
these tools to get what you want. I'm like, that's just playing in the same game. It's not changing how we carry responsibility, how we create a more sustainable planet for ourselves. It's just winning the old game. Uh, so trying to add to that and trying to enable us to change the game so that we can continue living instead of win the old game has been the only reason why I do what I do. And honestly, like anytime I'm trying to like represent 29K or the IDGs or any of that, like I always feel so discomfortable because I'm like, it was just an idea and we just want to make this happen. Like, I don't want to present a deck to you. I don't want to show you the product and the pros and cons and like, this is how our position is in the market. This is why you should buy. I'm like, I don't care about any of that. I don't care about the organization. I don't care about the funding. The only thing I care about is if we are making progress along building a more sustainable planet
Mm.
um, and lives for ourselves. And I think in retrospect, like maybe that's what has shined through as well, is like Erik does not care about those things. And he's quite dedicated around like really um, trying to move the needle on these issues, which I think for the partners that I have been working with for years, I mean, everybody wants their money, everybody wants their attention. And I think what they're looking for is who will be here even if I didn't have money, who is working along these lines no matter what happens, because that means that we're really companions in this direction. And sometimes our roads cross and we do something, sometimes they don't, but like we're still moving in the same direction. Um, and then, I mean, of course, like you have to pay your bills and you have to, I mean, I do that through my speaking engagements. I don't get a salary from any of the initiatives. But yeah, I mean, and in that way, I'm very lucky. Like I can do that.
Mm.
So I just do like the keynote stuff, and get really rallied up for these ideas, tell the story, and try to get more people involved, and that actually pays um, for my kind of living and my family, and then I can put the rest of my time into these these initiatives try to push the kind of movement of self-transformation for not for individual happiness. Like that's I studied happiness research for like 5 years, but that's I don't really care if people are more happy right now or not. Like moving from a 7 to a 9 doesn't really matter. I mean, of course, if I can do that for somebody, that's a great thing. But that as a goal in one of the happiest countries on the planet is not good enough. But really extending our sense of care to uh, other parts of the world, the suffering that exists, and longer time horizons
Mm.
is I think what is calling.
This is what Nipun Mehta shared on stage. He said the reward for service is more service. But
Yeah,
but
exactly.
but I want to circle this back because you mentioned your father and the sacrifices he made, and I mean I'll speak for myself and say as an entrepreneur, I've had to make a lot of sacrifices, and it's been challenging in that way. And so I'm curious for you because coming from that background of observing the expense of sacrifice in the territory where you're now creating something and maybe leading a project. How how has that territory been for you? The territory of maybe what you have had to
Yeah.
give up or struggle with, or maybe you've somehow managed to balance all that out.
No, 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 no. No. I mean, I've read all the books. Like I've done my homework regarding
and
all.
and I just want to offer us a little bit of context here because I
Yeah.
think it's relevant, right? For um, I think many people and many people watching this video are obviously in the world of transformation and delivering transformation in one way or another, whether you're teaching a course or consulting or running an organization. I think it really, in this moment in time in the world, it really, it I wish it wasn't so, but I feel like it's for many people it's a struggle. You really have to figure this territory out, and so that's really why I'm asking is just to hear about your journey with that and your process with that, because I feel like many people who are committed to this work are likely, or at least I am for sure, in this territory of what might be considered a challenging path.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's weight in this question, and I hear that. So I mean, like honestly, um, like building 29K as the CEO of a tech startup that's a non-profit, uh, as somebody who like I do not want to be the CEO of anything. Like I care about these ideas. I want to move things along. I want to start initiatives. I want to like convene around these ideas. I do not want to be a CEO. Like I've never had that pull. Some people do.
Mm,
I'm so grateful that they exist. um, so I mean, what I did was I kind of thought of this initiative as so important and um, so worthy of sacrifice because it was really enabling people who can't afford, most of them cannot afford the type of support that we are
mm,
offering. I mean, any of the programs on 29K would cost like $2,000 each. And we've had over 100,000 people gone through them for free. Um, and I was like, why would I not sacrifice for this? Uh, and then I became a father. And I was like, and the pandemic hit. And I could not get out of that story. I was still like, this is more important than being a present father.
mm,
This is more important than health. This is more important than my happiness. So eventually, I kind of let that story kind of engulf me. Uh, and like not running it as a CEO either. Like I was running it as my like people I care deeply about. So if we had to let somebody go, like I made sure that we were carrying them all the way until they found a new spot. That's an inconvenient way of thinking about the employees. But I was like,
Hmm.
that's the way I want to run a nonprofit like this. And eventually I burnt out severely. Like, I mean, people talk about burnout in very different ways. But this was, I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't go into a store, I couldn't leave like my garden for a year. I met nobody except my wife, my then two kids for a year. And then it took a year after that to slowly come back and to get my kind of faculties back online. Um, so I think for me at least, the kind of story of importance was very dangerous because so much convened around like me, my childhood, carrying responsibility of maybe my father or whatever. That was really like a shadow and something that I really had not worked on or done my own work regarding. So I'm not sure that I'm the one that we should be asking regarding how
Mm.
to set these boundaries. Um, I mean, we know that we're doing really important work. If you are working within transformation, you know you can see it with your eyes, right? And you can see how much that matters for others. But there is also, you know, this aspect of maybe we're doing that because we have a history of this ourselves,
Mm.
and we're trying to enable people to have the support that maybe we didn't have. Um, and I think coming into that with care is really, really important, and not to carry this work, uh, because you can help a lot more people if you're not carrying it in that sense. Mm, yeah. I mean, there's always the like, yeah, you have to walk the talk thing. Uh, I don't believe in that because like if you're walking the talk, it means that you're there. Like I think that it will always be a messy process
Mhm.
of failing and finding new shadows and like, but doing that, finding your shadows with kind eyes, I think
Mm.
is like a very, very, very important thing to when we find things that we really don't like about ourselves or things that we don't want to see, that we are even in those moments, or especially in those moments, actually bringing some kindness and care into that. I wish maybe that would be something I was better at least years ago.
Do you think that I really appreciate you, sharing so openly about this because this is a topic that's very close to me, as a direct experience and something I've been thinking a lot about as far as mm, like I wonder if it isn't also important to normalize that struggle in some way, because there's obviously, we're working in this transformational space of trying to create this aspirational world, and so there's a part that's like, no, no, that it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't have to break yourself to create something, and yet, so for so often, so it is, and so there's a question of, is that a symptom of a dysfunctional world, or is that part of the nature of creating something? Is there another way? And I'm not sure if that has a clean answer,
Mm.
but I do find value in the question. And at some level, also looking at, a situation like that and say, um, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I wonder for you, the benefit of hindsight, having gone through this extreme burnout and recovery. Um, would it have been possible another way if you're really honest with yourself?
Like not for me. Like I think I really needed. Like I had some intuition that like 29K was probably gonna kill me. Uh,
See, I really appreciate that commitment.
Yeah, no, no. And I was like, it's like you can die from worse things. Like this is if we're gonna change, if we're gonna transform 5 million people's lives,
Mm,
like I've seen people die for worse. Like my father is one example. Like he died for something that was not at all as meaningful. Like he had this fantasy. This is actually a lived experience for people. Like we're helping them with suffering.
mm,
That's pretty real. So I was like, yeah, maybe that's okay. But I think maybe like becoming a father and like approaching 37, the
mm,
year where my father passed. Like I have like 3 days left, 5 days left of being 37.
mm.
Um, and I think maybe it kind of comes down to have you heard about the about post-tragic hope?
No. Mm,
Oh, it's a beautiful term. So there's like the naive hope of like I'm the shining hero. I'm gonna like save the thing against the bad guys, and like this impact thing is gonna solve it, or this transformational process is gonna solve it. So it's a kind of linear story, hero's journey type of thing. Uh, and then the world kind of smacks you in the face, right? And it's like you're not the hero. You're just part of this huge system, and your little impact thing, even if you were successful, it didn't really matter that much
mm,
because you're in your narrative. Like again, you're like we're up in the stories, right? So you get kind of squashed, and then you find yourself in this kind of nihilistic, hedonistic, like I don't really care, or I tried and I failed and I can't, or like you're losing your agency at least. So you move from like uh, pre-tragic to kind of tragic to post-tragic hope, whereas like I'm part of this huge system. I'm just a small part. Um, but I can do something, and I can do something especially together with others. And maybe the most important thing I can do is show up
mm,
so that there's hope for me. There's both hope that maybe we can together shift something huge, but I'm not the hero of that story. But there's also hope, and maybe there's hope in me showing up in a better way, even if the world will, deconstruct itself. Um, Maybe there's hope in me being very present while that is happening, and to be, the rock that my family can lean on while the flood is hitting us, or whatever that would look
mm,
like. Right? So there's different types of hope. Like there's inner post-tragic hope, there's outer post-tragic hope of us actually fixing things, building utopia. And then there's just like me showing up no matter what.
mm,
And that kind of has been a little bit of what I've been kind of hoping for. Because now I have three small boys, like
mm,
1, 2, and 4. Um, I have no clue what the world is going to look like in 10 years. Like most likely school systems won't exist because AI tutors have taken over. And I'm not sure they will be raised by humans unless like we actually do something. Um, so we're moving into like high volatility, and what we've seen so far is not as volatile as the future that we're facing. Is my take. And maybe the hope is that I'll be there to show up with them,
mm,
and I'll hold them. Um, and then I'll do my best to shift whatever I can from where I am, like to add to any part of the healthy system that we could contribute to. Like that is the only thing I can do. And it's interesting because the more of a kind of volatile the world becomes, the more I kind of lean into this kind of post-tragic hope. And like I'm still going to try to show up. I'm going to try to do my work, my part. I'm going to try to serve um, the any type of a healthy, more living system I can add to. That's my cause. Um, and the rest doesn't really matter. Like I don't need to have a plan. I don't need to have an outcome. I don't need to know. Um, but I'm trying to add to health and to life, and I'm trying to do my work on myself. Uh,
mm.
And I find that a very comforting story. And if we can do that together, like if we can do the work together, support each other, um, like the rest doesn't really matter. Like we're showing up, we're actually being there, we're living more fully, and we're trying to carry more, we're trying to dance better. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of why we're here, no
And
matter the outcome.
it's easy to underestimate what an impact just your personal example has on the people around you. You know, doing this kind of transformational work is often, or can be, you know, people out there and people online, um, but also just that moment of kindness, or just somebody watching you go through a difficult situation and responding with grace, or just somebody, you know, someone being an asshole to you and you responding with kindness.
Yeah.
um,
No, I mean, I think that is like especially now, because the narrative is kind of moving from what I'm hearing is like, so the world is turning unsustainable due to human action. And a
mm.
lot of people's way of interpreting that is like human beings are broken. Maybe they shouldn't be here. Like maybe we are egotistical
Maybe we
individuals.
need the robots after all.
I mean, that's actually a lot of people out there actually. I mean, you see that in Scandinavia now. You see that in many countries around the world where young women are like, I don't want to have kids. I'm
Really?
not gonna have kids. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's
There's a
crazy.
huge trend now because they're like, it's the worst thing you can do for the environment. And I'm not sure that human beings are good.
Mm,
And if that's the story that we're telling ourselves, if that's kind of where the market has brought us or individualism has brought us, like it's not that human beings are broken. It's really that the system is unhealthy, like the system is unsustainable. It doesn't mean that human beings are broken. We can build a lot of different types of systems, um, but we need to then have that perspective. We need to have that type of development. So therefore, the kindness, acting kindly is not about the specific interaction. I mean, that's a beautiful thing in itself. But the more important thing is it's a different story of what it means to be human. Like that's actually I said that I gave away my money as an entrepreneur. That's actually how I started as a keynote speaker. Was I went out on like in Stockholm and a lot of different cities, and I gave away money because I'd read a lot of research on that people become more happy if they spend money on others rather than if they spend it on themselves.
mm,
And I was like, a lot of people know that, they can guess that, but they haven't had a lived experience of it. And if you have a lived experience of something, it becomes true for you in an embodied sense, the rider and the elephant again, not just a story, but a lived experience. So I walked up to strangers, I gave them like two $10 bills, and I was like, spend one on yourself, spend one on somebody else, and just reflect on which one moved you more. And what does that say about you as a human being?
I love that.
It's
How did
this
that go?
it's a cute little thing.
Mm,
But if you move somebody's story about identity, about what it means to be human, that human beings are neurologically built to become more happy if they help others than if they help themselves.
mhm,
Like in today's world, that's a revolutionary story that human beings are actually built for that. Because that's not the story that we see. That's not the market. That's not how social media works. That's not how Instagram works. That's not the perception that like people actually are built that way, but then can be hijacked by these more rivalrous stories. And I think just bringing that back, it really builds kind of this soil and this kind of field of potential that we could actually change the system, and it gives this type of hope that I think that people really need today to use as a reason also to work on themselves and to do the work because it's not necessarily easy.
mm. This lands for me kind of where we started with the group work, because um, yeah, I think maybe we often don't think about it this way, but for me, the most valuable thing you can give another person is presence. You know, and that's such a, you know, it's easy to throw that word around, but presence, to really be with somebody and receive them fully, it's a it's a rare experience. You know, we have our phones, we have our kids, we have our grocery list, our to-dos, and then we fit people into that. But and I think this is, you know, one of the transformational aspects of an intentional group process is it's a creates a context for we're going to be present with each other, and just that of encountering someone that's completely present with you is such a gift, is such a gift.
I mean, it's more than a gift. Like I would say, I mean, in secular society, we don't have this language, at least not in Northern Europe where I am in. But it's not just a gift; it's a sacred moment.
Mm,
Where it's like a living conscious being is actually witnessing me as the
mm,
same, and we're just holding that space here. And if I want to cry, dance, laugh, tell my story, whatever, like you're here to actually hold that space. Um, and it's, I mean, when it comes to that, most people's lives are very poor.
mm,
And I mean, those moments from research also is like what boosts your immune system, makes you happier, strengthens your relationships. It has these ricocheting effects that are very positive. And those moments are also what Instagram wants to take from you. It's what TikTok wants to take from you.
mm,
And even if all the people at Instagram are really great people, they know that TikTok is going to do it before them. So they have to. So it's this race to kind of steal away the fulfilling moments in between people because your engagement in that is actually fulfilling. We don't want you to be fulfilled
mm,
if we're pitted against each other, pulling towards young people's mostly attention. It's like we want to keep you on screen. We want to keep you away from those deep relationships, from those fulfilling experiences. And this is like nobody wants us to use technology, social technology, against each other in that way, but we're all captured by that, by these multipolar traps, Molochian dynamics. Um, and I mean, that's kind of what we're setting up against. That's like the devil in us. If we get caught by those dynamics, we really won't create the future uh, that we're proud of. And what we're talking about here is facilitating this type of growth is, I think, what enables us to see and care for and protect the things that really are sacred and that really matter to us.
yeah. Erik, we've been talking for, I've been kind of in my mind. Do we continue the conversation down so many threads? Because we've been talking for, I think, about 75 minutes now. And there's so much more territory I'd love to cover around the IDGs and that. So I'm a little bit just sitting with that for a moment. Um, I do have, I think there's one final like question or territory maybe I'd like to explore, which so with the IDGs, which is a project that you initiated, co-initiated, um, the inner development goals for anyone who's not sure what I'm saying here. So this is a set of 5 categories and 23 skills. And I wonder, I'm not even sure how to articulate this question, right? Because at some level, we're talking about being human and presence and being. And then on this other level, you know, we've created this list of attributes that somehow try to make concrete something that can feel a little bit intangible. And it's this interesting territory, almost pretty much where we started the conversation on what is transformation as a concept versus as the direct experience of being human. And I'd love to have you share a little bit about that territory, the value and the challenge of trying to break that down
Yeah,
into, you know, a 23-part framework.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks. Yes, I mean, working in this space of inner development, of personal growth, of self-help, transformation for a long, long time, and not being like, we never in the Oak Island Foundation, we never subscribed to one theory, one framework, one tool, whatever. Like we were always trying to find like what is the thing that is needed right now, what suits the right context. It was always like this meta position of like trying to index and understand and even initiate things that could really like fit together. And what I've kind of now in retrospect, because the IDGs has really taken off, like globally, like with governments implementing it, IKEA, Ericsson, Volvo, like a lot of corporates, Novartis, implementing it. What I found was together with this network of thinkers and doers, was that kind of position enabled us to see that there's really a missing conversation here around the field of inner development and transformation and how that connects to the outer system. Like we're seeing like the sustainable development goals from the United Nations. We're seeing that we're not making any progress here. And then, you know, you have the like uh, adaptive challenges framework or wicked problems framework or transformational learning, transformational growth framework. And the environmental movements or anybody working on these really complex issues, they're not talking this language. They don't even know that these tools exist. So seeing that, I was like, we really need a language for this. And if we could have a simple language that people kind of get at face value, because I mean, I've been struggling for a long time to try to get people to understand the importance of this field, the potential of it, how it can really shift people's behavior long term to be more holistic and more responsible. Um, so I think like failing miserably for 10 years long, trying to communicate this in a simple way, eventually led us to first we developed like the 5 super skills for the 21st century, which was this kind of amalgamation of a lot of different theories. And then I got to know Jakob Trollbeck, who actually designed the design language for the United Nations for the SDGs. And I was like, what if we just create something similar, but for inner
Mm.
transformation and putting it in the frame of if we are the ones creating these problems, how do we need to change so we can
Mm.
be part of the solution? So it's actually explicitly making the story of inner and outer being interconnected and entangled, and then saying they can both develop as well. So there's a lot kind of packed into the inner development goals. But that's the basic presupposition is that the inner and the outer are interconnected. Both exist, of course, and they're interconnected and they can develop. That's a story of hope. That means that you can create a different system. That means that we're causing the problem, which is a tough, you know, pill to swallow. Um, but it also means that there's hope. There's this post-tragic hope.
Mm.
Um, and then I think what has happened was we positioned it in a way that wasn't complex. We positioned it in a way, 5 categories. Also, like in between worlds, it's like, I mean, the first 3 are about being, relating, and then the latter ones are about acting individually and collectively. So like it's really moving, it's also pointing towards that there are these deep ideas in our being, and there's deep ways of being that influence our way of acting, and that
Mm.
being is the first category. I mean, there is some message. There is, I mean, eh, honestly, like we didn't design that. We gathered data from all the researchers and said, like, what is your take on what skills are needed out there to reach the SDGs? And then we just, you know, synthesized it and put some words on it. But the data came from the network. Uh, and then positioning it in a way that people intuitively could get and understand quite quickly without having a big explanation, I think also enabled people to kind of spread it. So you don't need us to add a story to it. It kind of
Mm.
is self-explanatory, and people intuitively are like, it's so interesting because you see some people are like, wow, intuitively like, finally, now I have a language for why my work is so important, and the things that I've had a hard time articulating, I now have a language for. how this connects to leadership and how this connects to social responsibility and seeing, the interconnected wholes of things. So that's one thing. Another one is like the top leading researchers on the world, and people are really like deep into it. They're like, that's just a stupid, simple framework. Like it doesn't even reference real research. It's just the signpost. And we're like, yeah, it's by design. That's the point.
Mm.
Because if that signpost can then direct that energy and all the attention to the deeper theories, the real tools and processes, then it's doing its work. So the point of the IDGs is never to grow the IDGs. The point of the IDGs is to grow all the initiatives and the researchers and tools out there that are doing the real work. So we can have more of that work energized, have more forums for it, have that conversation. Um, and yeah, and that seems to be happening. I mean, now we have over 500 hubs around the world. Some of the biggest corporations on the planet are actually implementing this and saying like, this is not only how we develop people internally, but this is also how we, and we're seeing this more and more, is like, this is also how we're going to start electing leaders in our organizations.
How's that?
It's like, when they think about who we want to lead, when we want to think about who we want to promote, is, are we seeing it through a frame of only metrics? Like we want, because the story of the inner development goals is that we are entangled with the outer world. And the reason why we're seeing the sustainability crisis is because of our actions. And it means that if we're only optimizing for growth and GDP growth, that's actually part of the problem. So you want to have leaders who can balance and navigate that we have one foot in the old world where we are optimizing for the kind of pyramid organization, and we do have these rivalrous dynamics with our competitors, but at the same time want to move the entire market with all these rivalrous competitors so that the market becomes more mature and takes more responsibility and can really become more sustainable. So if you then elect leaders who just are really good at optimizing for a simple metric, does not align as well with IDGs as having leaders who can do that, but can also transcend that way of looking at business as only a competitive framework, but also see that, you know what? Yes, we're players in this game, but we can also be part of moving the entire market and saying, how can we create a more sustainable, playing field for all? And that really is a different thing than winning the game. It's creating a better game. So I think that would be a hope. And I'd love to see more of that.
How did you design the research project for the IDGs when you're like, okay, we want to create this? And so I understand you put out a survey to a whole bunch of thought leaders and researchers in the field. What was the thinking behind? Was it just one question, or was it a series of questions? Like, what was the thinking into that?
Yeah.
That
So
research?
first, yeah, thanks. So first we had a group of researchers, some of the top thinkers in the world regarding these topics, who added to just formulating the question of how do we actually ask people a question that really points to the things they want to see here. And I don't remember exact formulation, but something along the lines of what inner capacity.
I have it right here. I can read it.
You
So
have it, yeah.
I think so. This is what capabilities, qualities, or skills do you believe are essential to develop individually and collectively in order to get us significantly closer to fulfilling the sustainable development goals? Is that the question?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was the first version of the question. It took like a couple of months to iterate that, both individual and collective. So it's not this individualistic framework, and also not only skills. We did tie it to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, because we really thought that was a really good frame. I mean, that's also a very simplistic way of thinking about complexity. The SDGs 17 goals, it seems very separate, but it's good enough, and it's the only global framework we have. So first was iterating on that question, and then it was sending it out to, I think we gathered like 4,000 responses from different types of experts in the field. And then there was the statistical like Delphi process where you're kind of doing a factor analysis of all the incoming data and seeing like what are the patterns in this data that are coming out. So you kind of try to distill just the essence of it and make the distinctions of what is the same and what is separate. To find the 23 skills and then to build from them the 5 categories of like where does it kind of make sense of that. So the categories is not from the data, the skills are, and the categories is our way of ordering them and making sense of it. And then now we're actually doing another version of that. We're trying to send out a similar question, but that's simplified to 2 million people. We'll see how many we can get. But also the thing is, like, we started this with 0 budget, just a few people, just like me, Jakob Trollbäck, Thomas Björkman. We asked Jan to take the leadership role. And he kind of led this work, and he's done such a beautiful job with that. But the thing is, like, the framework only started with that 4,000 group, which was mainly like American and European. But the framework then exploded all over the planet. And now we have like people writing a couple of books in Japanese, translating it Japanese. Like, we have hubs in almost all countries on the planet. A lot of people from the global south. Like, I have people contacting me from the Amazons and like, I mean, like the jungle, not the company.
Probably both.
Probably, yeah, probably both. And they're like, yeah, we started a hub here, and we're doing like great work. We're using this to move things along with our work here locally. And then we felt like this huge responsibility of this kind of outgrew the scope that we had capacity to take responsibility for. So therefore, kind of taking a step back, gathering resources, and then making sure that we're doing this globally so that it really can represent, especially like global south and indigenous cultures, because the language that we bridged between outer and inner systems and the capacity to develop those worlds, it kind of struck a chord and people started really using it. And I think people a lot in this space, like the transformational space, are like, this helps me partner with people. It helps me get a language for why my work is important. I'm seeing that both in consultants, but we're also seeing internally in organizations where people who work with leadership development all of a sudden are moved up in the organization to being part of top management. Instead of being a part of HR, they're actually part of strategy now, because they're like, the way that we develop our internal worlds of the top leadership is maybe the most strategic thing that we can do, not only for leadership, but then for the rest of the organization. The way that we're actually working with our inner development is actually kind of building the capacity to work with complexity and wicked problems, manage and adapt to challenges. And that is, saying that learning is the new strategy, basically. And then that really moves things along. So that means that people who work with this and can catalyze these types of abilities, it kind of moves from like the old pyramid organization where like leadership development is like, it's nice to have, and it's like something we do on offsites and stuff like that, to actually being something we do every single day, and it's super core and it's a requirement. It's really becoming a necessity that we adapt, because the rate of change is moving so quickly now that we're really feeling it in a different way, both in health and stress, but also in burnout and strategy, that like people move into planning in complex environments where planning is not at all, it's not even close to what you need to do in complex environments. It's a waste of time mostly in complex environments. But to really see and make those distinctions is something that is coupled to inner development. So it's really, I think that's been part of the reason. Like, there's this story of hope that we can develop, that human beings aren't, that this isn't our destiny to have an unsustainable planet. And then there is also the functionality of it, that it really kind of enables people working within the space to have a story that says that their work really is important.
So my final question for you, you've accomplished so much with the IDGs and with the S29K, and one thing that really stands out for me is really the incredible network of people that have been assembled around this work. All the advisors and all the people that have contributed to it. What would you say is the quality or the recipe or the ingredient for having been able to enroll all these people into this process? Because these are all super busy people that are being
Yeah.
approached by everybody. What
Yeah.
makes the way that these initiatives, or the way that you, I don't know who exactly approached them, or I'm assuming it was a collection of people, but how are these people approached in a way that actually got them to say yes?
Yeah. I mean, I think a consequence of really being, I was going to say obsessive, but but a better word maybe is deliberate around like the direction that you want to move in and how you want to contribute to the world. If you look at Thomas Bjorkman, the Oak Island Foundation, I mean, he grabbed me and Jan like 10 years ago, and he's like, we seem to be on the same path. So let's start working together. And then years and years and years go by, and we're still having the same direction in the Oak Island Foundation, and the network grows because it is this space where we have these conversations, and we try to do the work, and always try to enable the researchers to be part of the process and to really set the direction of what we're doing. Like they're the foremost thinkers. So it's really, I think, enabling them to be part of the initiative and giving them mandate. But I think, I mean, there's one thing about like, is the idea worthy of engagement? Is this something that is our times asking for something like this? If we had said something else, if the idea would have been different, we wouldn't have had their buy-in because they can choose whatever they want to be part of, right?
Mm.
So I think having an idea that is actually conducive to the context, and that kind of really tries to address something that is meaningful. And maybe we just lucked out. Maybe our like childhood traumas just converted, and we were like, we convened, and we're like, yeah, we everybody thinks inner development is, and the timing was just right. But 15 years ago, there was the exact same like type of people who met, and the timing was not right, so nothing happened. So I think the idea that the idea is suitable right now is central. But then also, I think here I want to highlight, I think, Jan's work with working with like master classes and getting to know these. Like, he's a great networker of building relationships. Like I love ideas, and I like the like nerd into the ideas and the concepts of it. But Jan is very much more building those types of relationships.
Mm.
So I think Jan and Thomas have been their work prior to the wording and the language of the IDGs has been kind of what kind of funneled those networks um, into the IDGs later on. So people who care deeply about what they're doing and who seem to earn trust over time around something that's deeply meaningful. Like that's an
Mm.
attractive place to be. Like you want to be part of that. Um, and then of course they pull in each other. Like Bob Keegan pulls in, I don't know, Amy Edmondson or
Mm.
Peter, Otto, and they're like, yeah, of course I want to be there. I mean, Otto and Bob are going to be there. Why wouldn't I? But there is also something to say around like the IDG summit and stuff like that. What has happened, like I see that in the master classes but in all of these, and maybe you see that in your context as well, is if you get together and there's not really a guru, but there's just this idea that like human beings can grow, we're not broken, we can do better. Let's do some real work here.
Mm.
There is this really cool thing that happens in like just how people look at each other and what they talk about. It's very generous. They're not rivalrous. Like they're not like if I enable you to grow or support, or like if you win, I win. Everybody wins. So it's there is something that happens there. And I've heard several people say it in the kind of meetings that we've had where people are like, I mean, I met one woman and she's like 45, and she said after like 3 days of one of the IDG events, she was like, "This is the first time in my life that I feel at home."
Mm.
And I was like, "That's so beautiful, but it's also so painful to hear that."
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I mean, people need so little. when it comes to these things, like I think so many people out there are so starved, they don't really have a sense of being at home, but rather being in a competition. And to create that and to enable more people to have that, I think that's a good thing.
That's the work. Yeah. That's the work. Erik, thank you so much for this very wide-ranging and super deep conversation, and just your authenticity and vulnerability and honesty. I really, really appreciate this time together.
Having
Much so.